Hey, what's going on? It's Matt Polis, and it's time for another episode of MeatSauce for Tuesday, February the 16th, 2021. This is episode number 18. Welcome back. Thanks for joining me. I hope the last week or so has treated you well. I feel like I keep talking about it, but this winter has been relentless. It's been below freezing, I feel like, for almost like 2 months straight. And as of really the last couple days, the snow has also been pretty relentless. I know we've had like, I don't know, I want to say like 3 or 4 inches on the ground prior to the last 2 days, and then I think we added on another 6 to 7, maybe 8 inches. So there's definitely at least a foot of snow on the ground out there, and it just looks cold. I mean, it looks like a winter wonderland. It looks like something I would enjoy, but I'm also pretty okay being inside. I know the Midwest as a whole, including Michigan and Ohio, has gotten a lot of snow over the last couple days, and I know even the Southwest or the South and like Texas and Louisiana, and then moving up through Arkansas and Kansas and all of that have gotten hit pretty hard, and really, really cold temperatures, really cold wind chills as well. It's weird though, because like while all this is happening, it's still like middle of February. March typically starts to kind of warm up a little bit. In Michigan, it definitely stays decently cold through March, but Ohio tends to warm up in March. So it just feels so crazy that spring is like right around the corner, and here we are with like a foot of snow on the ground. Within a month, it could be so different. I want to give a quick shout out to Valentine Distillery in Ferndale, Michigan. Jess and I went to their cocktail lounge last Wednesday for her birthday, and it was such a cool place, and it was a great time. It felt like I've never been to like a speakeasy, but when you walk in to the front, like where the front area is, where the bar is, and they have like couches, and everything's like red velvety type old couches and chairs. It felt like a speakeasy, like in that space. I know speakeasies are usually like in the basement or behind a wall or whatever, but this one just had that kind of vibe too. Big crystal chandelier, and Postmodern Jukebox was singing all kinds of tunes on their speaker system. But we were there for a couple hours, and we ended up being the only ones there the entire time, other than the bartender, other than any other workers, I guess. But it's just crazy. Like, we sat there for like they opened at like 2:30. So yeah, we were drinking cocktails at 2:30 in the afternoon, but that's what you do on a birthday. But yeah, it was really cool. That I thought for sure before we would leave, somebody would walk in and be another customer, but no one did. It was just us the entire time. Like I said, they have like all these couches and all this red velvety material, and the cocktails were great. Jess had a cocktail called the Banana Spice and Everything Nice, and it had like a roasted banana over top of the drink, and so that was really good. And it featured their Liberator Old Tom gin, which is regular gin, and then they age it in oak barrels for 2 years, so it's got a really dark profile to it. And I started with an old fashioned, and then I had a pour of their bourbon. Their kind of staple bourbon is called Mayor Pingree, and they have different labels of Mayor Pingree. So they have like a red label, orange label, blue label, and black label. And the pour I had was their black label, and which is it's sourced through MGP, which for those that don't know, MGP is a distillery in Indiana that basically helps young distilleries get off the ground by those new distilleries buying the bourbon from MGP that they've been aging for so long, and so these young distilleries are able to come in, and while they're waiting on their own bourbon to age, they're able to get their distillery off the ground with using MGP's bourbon. So this is MGP's bourbon, but 90% of it is 12 or 13 years old. and oh my God, it was so good. And I was like thinking about it the next day. I was like, holy cow, like 13 years old. I graduated high school in 2008. And so that bourbon was going into barrels in 2008. And to think that I was graduating high school when that happened and then I was drinking it, it just, I don't know, it was like just for me, it was a cool moment of like history, my own history in that way. And man, it was just so good. Just every time I would nose the glass, it was just like, it was just heaven. And then obviously sipping on it, it was 120 proof. So I was definitely feeling it after that pour. And that bottle typically runs for about $90, and they didn't have any in stock, and the bartenders aren't really ever told when they do have them in stock, because it's such a limited small batch that they don't have them all the time. So it was really cool just to have a pour of it, to be able to try it and kind of enjoy it in the place that it was bottled or whatever. I think Jess's second drink was called The Last Straw, which I think had strawberry-infused vodka, which it was boozy. Holy cow. And it had kind of just a weird initial flavor, like not something I think either of us really expected. But we went there because I had gotten her a bottle of that Liberator Old Tom gin that I mentioned before for her birthday, and I wanted her to try a cocktail from the distillery that gin was made that had that gin in it. I thought that would be kind of cool before she tried the gin here at home. So overall, I thought it was awesome. I definitely want to go back. I definitely need to get a bottle of the Mayor Gris. I know they have, so their red label, so they're old. There's an old enough distillery now to where their red label is a 4-year-old bourbon, and it's their own stuff. So it's the own stuff made in-house by their blender, master distiller, master blender. And apparently everyone I've watched on YouTube talk about it, it's just giving it rave reviews. So I definitely need to pick up a bottle of that. I think the 4-year-old bourbon is about $50, which I found out that younger distilleries who have young bourbon, they charge so much sometimes to kind of cover their overhead on getting the distillery started. So that's why, one company I think of right off the bat is Rabbit Hole, that, they have some young whiskey, and their bottles are pretty expensive for being as young as they are. So that kind of makes sense to me. And it's nice that Valentine Distillery is able to keep their prices relatively low, but have a great product in the meantime, because some places that, like, Rabbit Hole, they charge a lot, and their whiskey's not that. It's okay. It's not great. But then you have Mayor Gris, who is a 4-year-old, $50 cheaper than some places, and really, really good. So kudos to them. Definitely want to go back. It's such a cool vibe, and really enjoyed being there. Speaking of bourbon, as I seem to be only talking about ever in my life anymore, let's dive into this week's edition of What's on the Shelf. And if you're just joining, the What's on the Shelf segment is I take a bottle from our whiskey cart here at home and talk about what I like about it, give some facts about the distillery, give some info, some background, just to kind of share, what I am enjoying, and maybe along the way help you if you're interested in getting started with drinking bourbon or not really sure what to start with, don't want to spend a lot of money. I am definitely your person for not wanting to spend a lot of money. This week we were taking a look at another great value in bourbon and one of my favorite daily sippers. I really can't believe I haven't finished this bottle yet, but as soon as I do, it's one of those that I would go out and buy again. Today is all about the Wild Turkey Distillery and Wild Turkey 101. Wild Turkey is a distillery out of Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. The name Wild Turkey is said to have come about after an executive named Thomas McCarthy took some warehouse samples on a wild turkey hunting trip back in 1940. The bourbon was wildly popular amongst the people on the trip that Thomas McCarthy began bottling Wild Turkey in 1942. So pretty cool that, and I don't know, I don't know if this is just an old wise tale or if this is, true. I feel like it's true, is that, they went on a hunting trip for wild turkey. The guy brought some bourbon, the friends really enjoyed it, and they ended up calling it wild turkey because of that. Today, master distiller Jimmy Russell, who became the master distiller back in the 1960s, still holds that same title today. And now his son, Eddie Russell, who was also named a master distiller as well in 2015, also works for Wild Turkey. So it's like one of the only, if not the only, father-son combination distillers in the game right now. Both are in the Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Fame, which is pretty cool. All of the products in the Wild Turkey line include Wild Turkey, which is their basic original release. I think it's in the 86 proof range, I believe, followed by the Wild Turkey 101, which is what I'm talking about today. Both of those bottles also have a rye version of themselves. They also have spirits such as Long Branch, which is a Matthew McConaughey collaboration. I believe he's like the artistic director of Wild Turkey, so that's his collaboration bottle. And then then you also have Wild Turkey Rare Breed Bourbon and Rye, and then the Wild Turkey Master's Keep, which is their most expensive yearly release. It comes in a really nice box, and they have a different release every year, and it's something different. I think 2020 was a 17-year bottled in bond bottle, which looked really nice and got really good reviews. And then they also have a Russell's Reserve 10-year and a Russell's Reserve single barrel. I've personally only had the Wild Turkey 101 and the Rare Breed, but they're both great tasting and great value for their respective level of bourbons. So Wild Turkey is doing a really good job of making things affordable and having really high quality in the process, which I really enjoy. A few stats about the Wild Turkey 101. The 101 is non-age stated, but it's said to be a blend of 6, 7, and 8-year-old bourbons, which is pretty good. Really good, honestly, for the price range. It's 101 proof, if that wasn't obvious. It does come out of the barrels around 109 proof, and then they dilute it down to 101. The mash bill is 75% corn, 13% rye, and 12% malted barley. So it is considered a high rye bourbon. It has a deep gold, amber, and copper color to it when it's in the glass. Some nosing notes that I am trying and working to pick out are vanilla, medicinal cherry, oak, cinnamon, and baking spices. Tasting notes include much of the same as the nose, along with some caramel. This bottle typically can be found for around $26, and I think $26 is in Michigan. I'm sure it's cheaper in other states. I've heard of it being $20, $22, $24, just depending on where you are, and that's one of the best values. I mean, you get 101 proof, something that's aged, a blend of 6, 7, and 8-year-old bourbons. I mean, that's kind of a sweet spot right there of value. It's one of the first bottles that I purchased for our whiskey cart and for my collection, and it's one that, again, I would definitely continue to buy once the bottle is gone. I really can't believe that it's not gone yet. I think I've been trying to savor it, but you really can't go wrong with that proof at that price, and again, adding to the fact that 6, 7, and 8-year-old bourbons, I mean, it's crazy. And on the bottle it says number 4 barrel char, which is also known as alligator char. So basically, the barrels that the bourbon sits in are charred with fire at a very high temperature for different periods of time. I believe because it says number 4, that means it's pretty high amount of char. I think number 5 is the highest. But this allows the bourbon to seep into the cracks and crevices of the wood and really soak up as much of that wood and char and smoky flavor as it can. So I know Wild Turkey, I don't know if they do it on all of their products, but definitely on the 101 and on the Rare Breed, they have that number 4 alligator char. So pretty cool stuff. I really, again, if it's not obvious, I can't recommend the Wild Turkey 101 enough as a great entry level bourbon and a great daily sipper. that you can just buy over and over again, and again, at least only a $26 bottle, at least in Michigan. It could be cheaper elsewhere. So definitely recommend the Wild Turkey 101 from Wild Turkey Distillery. All right, that's it for this edition of What's on the Shelf. Let's move on into some sports here. So I don't know if you saw or not, but J.J. Watt last week of the Houston Texans asked to be released. He and the organization did agree to part ways. They're said to be really quickly. They're said to be about a dozen teams or so that are interested in the 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, who's going to be going into his 11th season. And the Cleveland Browns are said to be one of those teams in the mix. And I know some people aren't too high on the Watt brothers, and honestly, I'm not crazy about them either. I know JJ has done a lot of good for the Houston community, and I think he still has a lot of juice left in the tank. And still be a dominant player in the NFL. He is a bit injury prone, which is something that would concern me a little bit. But, to think about him lining up on the opposite side of Myles Garrett sounds pretty incredible. And this, I think, something the Browns, desperately need. So, and I think he brings a ton of leadership and a ton of experience and would be a great leader on that side of the ball. Now, I know Myles Garrett kind of is that leader, but I feel like adding a guy like J.J. Watt would be huge. But even if they don't end up signing him, I think there's still plenty of talent out there at the defensive line position that the Browns can certainly go get. But this is an intriguing name to be thrown in the hat. I mean, he wants to go to a winner. He wants to win a Super Bowl as fast as possible. And I think some people may not be able to admit it, but I feel like the Cleveland Browns are kind of on that cusp right now. Pat McAfee was saying on his YouTube show last Friday, which, by the way, if you like sports and you've never heard of Pat McAfee, he's a former punter for the Indianapolis Colts, and he's awesome. He's hilarious. And he's started a podcast or a YouTube show or whatever you want to call it. And it's fantastic. He's got like a whole group of guys, and it goes for like 3.5 hours, and it's just really informative. And it gives just real takes on situations. And he's able to bring on NFL players because they feel comfortable talking to him. And he's not a regular like journalist. So it just feels a little more real, a little more not trying to get clicks, not trying to, be the person who breaks the big story or whatever, which seems to be all the sports journalists want to do nowadays, is just be that guy who breaks the big story. But so Pat McAfee on his show last Friday was saying that Watt was set to make, I think, like $17 million with the Texans this upcoming season. But could certainly do a smaller amount for like a 1-year deal. He's definitely not somebody that I want to give a ton of money to just because of his age. But if he can help lead the Browns to a Super Bowl, I am down for that. Some other teams that Watt could be linked to include the Bills, the Titans, the Ravens, and the Chiefs. So we'll see what happens with that. The AFC is just continuing to get better and better and better. And it's just already so good. The NFC, man, you almost wish your favorite team was in the NFC right now because there's not much there, if I'm being honest. Moving on to some MLB news / Cincinnati Reds news. The MLB announced last week that they will be keeping the 7-inning doubleheaders and keeping the extra inning rule where each team starts with a runner on second base. This was implemented during the 2020 season when they only played 60 games. It was a way, because they were probably going to play more doubleheaders because of COVID and games getting canceled, that they didn't want to have the games run super long, have 2 9-inning games, which I actually did not mind the 7 innings at all. I mean, I think it was as fair as it can be. It almost puts pressure on the teams to do something sooner, quicker, which I kind of liked, and the games don't feel as long, which was nice. So I don't know how many doubleheaders we'll have this season, but if we do, then they're going to be 7-inning games. The extra inning rule was implemented, I think, to again, try to speed up the game, try to not make the game go to 15, 16, 17 innings. If you're starting with a runner on second base, then it's a little not easier, but you're definitely set up better to score a run to try to end it either in the 10th inning or 11th inning. So those two are going to be staying for this upcoming MLB season, but they are not going to keep the universal DH, and they're not going to keep the expanded playoffs. And I can't believe, I guess I'm not shocked that the MLB said that they're not going to keep the universal DH because they hate fun. But to not keep the expanded playoffs, they're all about revenue and all about money. And the way you make more of all of that is expanded playoffs. People watch baseball during the playoffs. Like legit baseball fans and people who are obsessed with the game will watch all throughout the regular season. I get the MLB.TV, so I will watch as many Reds games as I can here at home. But to not have expanded playoffs when you know that gets the most eyeballs, to have more teams, to have more potential fans enjoying the playoffs just seems crazy to me. It's a lost opportunity to continue to grow the sport. And to go back to the universal DH, like those two, that and the expanded playoffs were the two most popular things, in my opinion, from fans and I bet the players last year, and they're not going to keep it. The universal DH, like teams, like it's changing how teams sign players this year, because you have some older guys in the league that maybe can't play every day, but then they could still hit and be successful. And I'll be honest, up until this past year, I was usually just against the universal designated hitter because I just grew up with the National League having their pitchers bat, And after having this past season with the universal DH, I'm like, I never want to see a pitcher hit again, unless it's like Michael Lorenzen or something. It just kills the game. You get bases loaded, you have a chance for a big inning, and then your pitcher comes up. And it's like most pitchers don't really care to hit and don't really expect to get a hit, and fans don't expect them to get a hit. So it's just like, again, slowing the game down, making it more boring, and I don't know. I think it's more fun when you have a lineup full of power hitters. I think that's pretty sweet. But it's just a classic MLB. They're not going to keep the things that everyone loved, but they're going to keep the things that most people hated. And the runner on second to start extra innings is what people hated. So I just don't get how a league can be so disconnected from their fan base and from their players. Do owners vote on this stuff? I feel like they're involved. Why don't players get any say on what happens with this? It's really crazy how bad Rob Manfred and Tony Clark are for baseball. And for those that don't know, Rob Manfred is the commissioner of baseball, so he's kind of like the head honcho. And Tony Clark is the voice for the Players Association, so he's kind of the guy that the players go to, and then he, on behalf of them, talks with like Manfred, but he doesn't seem to do anything that they want him to do. So they're both bad at their jobs, and it only continues to frustrate the fans. It's really a bummer for baseball that these two yahoos are running the show, if I'm being honest. Because like I said, the universal DH was awesome. It gave more excitement to the game. It allowed teams to bolster up their rosters a bit more. And for a long time, like I said, I was always against it. But again, now that I've had it, it's a bummer. It's a bummer, and I hope this is the only year that they decide not to have it, and then they bring it back because they realize, it was actually better. It's crazy, though. I believe pitchers and catchers report this week. I think the Reds pitchers and catchers report tomorrow. I know there's already players down there. There's already been players down there for a couple weeks now, but it's the official reporting date, which is pretty cool. So the Reds are in Goodyear, Arizona for their spring training, and I really can't believe I was looking at the calendar yesterday. Their first spring training game is February 28th, so like 2 weeks from this past Sunday. So it's like so close how baseball is, and it just seems so soon. And I'll be honest, as a diehard Reds fan, heading into this season, I do not have very high expectations for them. I had high expectations for them last year, and they struggled for half of the season and then kicked it into high gear like towards the end and somehow squeaked into the playoffs. I really hope they prove me wrong, but the front office really, really kind of let me down, with not making any key additional moves for the offense this offseason. I know they still have Mike Moustakas, Nick Castellanos, and Shogo Akiyama from last year's free agent signings, and maybe with the full season they will play a lot better. Akiyama really turned it on late at the end of the season and was a much more consistent hitter and being a lot more patient at the plate and driving the ball to the opposite field, and Castellanos got off to a hot start last year, but really cooled off by year's end. I mean, he was red hot in those first 15 games or so. And then Moustakas was hurt a lot for a 60-game season. He was out a ton, but I don't know. We'll see. If you combine those three guys with a hopefully healthy Nick Senzel, Nick Senzel has been injured a lot. He had COVID last year, so he missed almost 30 games, I think, almost half the season. And then you have Eugenio Suarez, Joey Votto, and Jesse Winker. You could have something, but right now it really just feels like the same old Reds. A lot of the same faces and same names that we see year in and year out have so many struggles and high points and more struggles and a little bit higher points and then really struggle. And I really hope it's not the same old Reds. There's no way that the ownership can say that they went all in on 2020 and it just didn't work out. So now we need some sort of rebuild to save money because of the pandemic last year, not having fans. It's just not right. And it really seems across the baseball world that's what's happening with all these teams, and they need to be called on it. It's bad for the game. Moving forward, it's bad for the game. But I'm calling it now. If the Reds are really bad this year and they get to the trade deadline and they're out of contention, look for them to dump several of the guys I just named in a trade of some sort. Because I know Castellanos can opt out after this season. So if the Reds are bad this season, I don't see how he comes back for a third year. So I could totally see them potentially trying to trade him. If he's hot, trade him at the trade deadline and try to get some pieces for him, knowing he's probably not coming back. So it could get bad really quickly if they are bad. We could find ourselves back in the 2015, 16, 17 years of the Reds, and I really hope not. The Reds fans do not deserve that at all. But it just seems like something the Reds, would do if it comes to that, So pitching wise, I feel solid, but also it feels incomplete a little bit. You're going to have Luis Castillo and Sonny Gray as your aces. Then a mix of, Tyler Mahle, TJ Antone, maybe Wade Miley. I know Michael Lorenzen is going to be competing for a spot in the rotation. I think I like that a lot. I think he did really well last year when he had to step into that role. So, and he certainly struggled in the bullpen at times last year. So to see him step in, pitch 4 or 5, sometimes even 6 innings, and be so effective, I think I like him in that role. And Tyler Mahle had a really strong season. TJ Antone did as well for being a rookie. Wade Miley, I don't know about him. I mean, he is a little older. He doesn't impress me too much. But if he can stay healthy, maybe he can be one of those guys that just gives you a lot of innings. And he's one of those guys I think that the offense has to kind of keep them in the game because he's going to give up runs for sure. But if he can give you, each time out 6-7 innings, I mean, that would be huge for the bullpen. But I don't know. It's going to be a really interesting season. I mean, I'm excited to watch baseball. I'm excited for it to come back but I think either way, it's time for Reds fans to buckle up because the season's either going to be a wild ride or incredibly bumpy the whole way and full of disappointment. I really hope they surprise me and come out playing solid baseball right away. That's something over the last several years that the Reds just never do. They get so far behind in the standings that by the time they start to actually play decent baseball, they're too far out of it. So if they can start hot And, they'll cool off at some point. Everybody does. Maybe they'll be right in the thick of things when they start to kind of heat back up again. It's something the Reds never do. So maybe this year they'll actually do that for once. And I know Joey Votto wants to start better record-wise than they usually do. Every year it seems like they're like 5 games, 6 games, 7 games, 8 games under 500, and it's just like so hard to come back from that and then also get into first place. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm really looking forward to baseball season. And yeah, I think that's going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you have a great rest of your week. Stay safe with all this winter weather happening, and I will talk to you next time. Bye, everybody.